Hello and welcome to another episode of the Journeyman Music Show. Today we talk about songwriting tips to help you make and produce better songs. As always, I'm Paul, I'm the co-host along with my good friend Chad. Hey Chad.
Hello.
And today we're actually really happy to introduce you to our first guest ever, Rahul. How are you doing, Rahul?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you doing?
So yeah, the goal of this episode is to share the most useful tips that we have accumulated over the few months and years of experiences that we each have. And Chad and I both thought, okay, who is one of the most talented and experienced guys we know? And yeah, your name just popped up so fast, Rahul. I hope we're going to learn a lot from you today, and we're really happy to have you here.
Well, thank you very much for having me. This will be fun.
And just so you know that we're not just like throwing nonsense right into your ears or headphones or wherever, Rahul has some credentials he brings to the table. He's the guy, right? Rahul, you've worked with some huge, like top one single charting people, right? Three Doors Down, Kid Rock, you said Shinedown. Yeah, some other people, right?
Yeah, I've been blessed to write with a lot of people, and yeah, I mean it's been a good time. I've met some pretty amazing guys. Yeah, and the last project I had some pretty big names on it, so that was it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, so he knows what he's talking about. So when we're talking about like songwriting tips, this guy, he's got songwriting tips. So Rahul, we know a little bit about your credentials. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's where I reside now. I've been playing music since I was 13, so without saying my age, I'll say it's been a very long time. Music's always been a part of my life. My grandpa was a famous poet from India, so he kind of passed that gene on to me. And ever since I had the tools to write, I've been doing it ever since, man.
That's great. That's so cool, man. I've always wished that I had a calling like that. I think we actually talked about that a little bit in our first episode, right? To just have that one thing that you're going to do. Oh, I'm so jealous of that. But, not everybody has it. And this podcast is for everybody, even if you don't have that, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think you're in for a real treat. We're in for a real treat because, I'm newer to this than anybody, so I need some songwriting tips. All right, so with that, why don't we just jump right into the tips? That's what y'all came here to see, whatever. So our first tip comes from the consummate professional himself, Rahul. So why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
All right, so this is a podcast about tips about how to become a better songwriter. So it's going to be a little bit strange that I'm about to give you the number one tip I would suggest to everybody, that there are no rules. You'll come across, the people that'll say, you have to do it this way. You have to do it that way. You're only going to have a great song if you do it this way. And here's what you need to do with that is you need to take what they're saying, listen to what they're saying, listen to what this other person is saying, listen to this other person is saying, take that all in, and then kind of create your own thing. Because at the end of your journey, which is always going on, it's about developing what is best for you as a writer, not what's best for that person, So basically, it's like a tool belt. The more tools you have, you don't have to necessarily use them all, but you have them in case you do. So knowledge is power for sure, but there's no rule book, and that's the great thing about music is that there are no rules. And if you think it sounds great that way, then do it. I can point you in the right direction for things to try out, but at the end of the day, it's about what works for you as a writer.
Yeah, I think that's really great, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, since I've started trying to make music, I've started listening to it a little bit differently as well, right? And it's only been pretty recent, so I grew up just, listening to music like everybody else and enjoying it and whatever. But, for a little while now, I've been trying to listen to it a little bit more, like, critically, like trying to separate out the pieces and see what gives this effect and what gives the next effect. And it's crazy, just the difference between, like, songs from decade to decade, right? That proves your point that there are no rules, right? I mean, people do things completely differently. And even right now, the the tips that you'll use for folk music are not the same as what you'll do for like EDM, you know? So I think your point is absolutely well taken, that there really are no rules, but there are good ideas, but yeah, no hard rules for sure.
Yeah, I really like that tip as well. I think it applies to a lot of different topics within songwriting as well. You know, it's about the rules for the structure, for the instruments, for the production, for the mixing. There's so many rules and conventions. And actually, it feels like when things begin so common that they start to feel like a rule, then the first person to break that rule sounds like a genius. And it sounds fresh, and it sounds entertaining and interesting. And it's almost as if the minute there is a rule that starts to emerge, then you need to break it. So all in all, like, there's no rule. I agree.
Okay, so moving on to our second tip, because the first one is a great tip. It's a great idea. It's something that everybody needs to know, but it doesn't really give a clear picture of like where to go. You know, it's kind of a more general tip. So now we have something a little bit more specific, which is also Rahul's advice, which is just to start with a blank project and just get something down. So can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any kind of form of creativity, you got to look at it as your blank canvas. It's yours to do whatever you want to do with it. So basically you just have to say, hey, I'm just going to put something there and see what happens. Because it's crazy. Like, there'll be times where I'll just start off with the simplest thing, and then it'll evolve into a song. And that simple thing might not even make it in the song, but it's what started it. I mean, it's like a flower, you know, you just kind of plant some seeds sometimes, and something beautiful might come from it. Because if you get overwhelmed with the idea of just, I have to write a song, that's pretty heavy weight to have on you, to be like, hey, you're just thinking about the end project. But if you think of it like dominoes, like once one thing falls down into another one, it snowballs into ideas, and the idea will feed into another idea and into another idea. So as long as you just start with something, even the simplest thing, see where it takes you. And it might not take you anywhere, but at least you tried it out. And then the next one probably will take you somewhere. But the problem is, if you don't try it the first time, you'll never know, and you might have just missed out on an incredible song.
Yeah, that makes me think about one of these assignments that we had together in the class we took about songwriting, where the exercise was to just pick a chord progression and go from there. And I really remember this because if you want to lay down a chord progression, you also need to pick a sound, right? And it's also like a good starting point, picking the sound, picking the chord progression. Those are two different elements that can completely start the snowballing effect into like a full written song, right? And I remember this chord progression that I wrote didn't really make any sense. I used strings for this, and it ended up being a full song. Like I ended up finishing that project, but like if you listen to that first idea, like that 20 seconds clip, and you listen to the 4-minute song that came out of it, you can't recognize it. There's so much stuff that happened between the first idea, and I really like the analogy you made with the seed, like the seed, planting the seed, and then like something comes up. You don't know what kind of flower it's going to be, but something will come up, and you don't recognize the seed anymore, but at least you have something. And I think this is a great way to start, especially when you don't have a lot of experience, you don't have a flow or a process that you're familiar with. Starting with a sound or a story or maybe a chord progression is, in my opinion, a great tip.
Yeah, and that actually leads perfectly, I think, into tip number 3, if you're keeping track at home. And this is one that I came up with, but, it's not like it's anything insane that nobody else could come up with. I just happened to put it down on the document. And that is to start tiny. Start as tiny as you want, right? You can start with absolutely anything, and it might grow into a song, and it might grow into a cool song if you're lucky. Just a really cool like VST sound or a synth sound, a cool drum beat if that's your sort of persuasion, an emotion that you want to convey, a particular kind of aesthetic, like a lyric that pops into your head, even somebody else's song that sounds really cool, and you're like, ooh, I want to make something kind of like that, and then you just try and maybe pick out a sound that they used and just put something down with it. Start as tiny as you want. You can get 3 MIDI notes with a cool sound that you like, and that can blossom into anything. you know? So there's no shame in starting as small as you possibly can and just going from there, you know? And I think that that's exactly what you guys have been saying, right? Which is just get anything down, get the smallest thing down, and you never know where it's going to go from there.
Another way to think about it is baby steps. You know, you think about you're going to get to the finish line, you know, and it's a journey on the way there that, you know, will be fun. So you just put one step in front of the other, and you'll get there. You'll get to that finish line. But yeah, just start off small and take it one step at a time. And there's no hurry.
All right, so moving on from the way to start, a way that you can move from there a little bit. We've mentioned, you know, just get a couple of notes down, get a little progression, anything like that. But after you get that down, once you have something that you think might be a little interesting, then you're free to, tip number 4, experiment. Just see where it goes, see where it can take you, that sort of thing.
Okay, so experimentation is super, super important because, again, it goes back to we were talking about before, you never know what will come out of things. So experimentation is super important. And there's really no limit to this. And I'll go into the songwriting aspect of experimenting. Initially, when I started writing, I kind of only wrote one way. I would start off with the music, you know, and then I would finish the entire music thing. Then I'd do the vocals, you know, and then kind of recently I was like, I'm going to challenge myself to come up with the melody first, and then I'll write the song around the melody and see how that turns out. And then another one, I was like, I'm going to challenge myself. I'm just going to write lyrics without any melody in mind, and I'm going to see what that comes into, because I had never done that before, because I played drums and guitar and all that stuff, so to me it was always music first. So just experimenting with those different ideas and those different ways to write, for one, it gave me the confidence to know that I could do it. And then two, if I have to do that now, if I'm co-writing with somebody and someone comes in with just lyrics, back in the day, I would have been like, well, what's the melody? Now I'd be like, yeah, honestly, I would be like, hey, that's just a poem. But like now I can be like, all right, well, let's just go through the lyrics and then let's mess around with it, see what happens. Or if someone comes up with a killer melody, a hook, and then we have to build around that. Or if someone just comes in with an acoustic guitar, build around that. And it just goes, because with technology and everything that's going on right now, the possibilities are endless. So as far as our imagination will take us, that's how far we can truly go with songwriting. And again, it goes back to not everything works. But yeah, at least we have the capability of trying things out now that we didn't have before. Like, if you have an idea, you can try it with different other instruments, or, electric guitar, acoustic guitar. You can do it with a snap of a finger now. And it just makes it so much more fun just to be like, hey, I'm going to try something new that I don't know about. It keeps you more creative, experimenting. It's just, like I said, it just is more tools on the tool belt. And you're always learning. So the more you experiment, you might find out the best way to write is something that you haven't been doing, and you don't know, and you're not going to find that out until you experiment.
Just out of curiosity, you mentioned the songs that you tried, like starting with lyrics or starting with a melody. How did those turn out? Have you used those for anything? Yeah,
it turned out well. The one with the lyrics, it was actually someone else wrote them, and that's why I was challenged to do it. And the song came out really well. It really did. I was pretty surprised, and I was pretty proud of myself. I mean, it's okay. By the way, as a writer, it's okay to be proud of yourself. toot your own horns at sometimes, because when you do a good job, you do a good job. Pat the back.
Nice. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, there'll be different writers that have different strengths, and some producers are killer with just someone comes in with lyrics, but they might not be the ones that can come up with the music first, and there might be a producer like for me, I prefer full production before the lyrics even come in. And some people might disagree with that, because some people are like, well, how do you know if you're going to step on the toes of the vocalist? And I was like, well, that's when you start that's when you start experimenting, back to that, and that's when you start taking things out, putting things back in. And yeah, man, it really opened my eyes to, I was stuck in my own way, like an old man. I was stuck in my ways as far as how writing went, and to me, that's all I needed to know. And it really wasn't until recently where I was just like, I literally just dropped my guard down. I just let it all go, and I was like, I don't know everything, and that's awesome because it makes tomorrow interesting, and it makes the day after that interesting because I'm going to challenge myself to learn something new every day. And once I dropped that guard and put the ego aside, my writing got better, I enjoyed it more, and I was making songs so much faster. And again, it's that finding what works for you and finding out what doesn't work for you. And it's been, like I said, man, this entire journey of all these years, it's been so much fun because there's no learning something, anything is just, it's a blessing. And with music, again, there's no right or wrong answer. Like it sorry to go on a tangent, but it kills me when people like are in music school and they get graded on their piece, because to me it's just like, well, if the teacher doesn't like it, who's to say that this other person, it won't change their life? So it's about what works for you, and it's about what you like, and then
So inspirational.
Yeah. Come, jump through the screen and give me a hug. Come on.
Yeah, I really like what you said about challenging yourself, and I think coming up with constraints is one of the best way to experiment and come up with new ideas, right? For me, like, I'm still at the stage where I haven't written a lot of songs, so experimenting is actually a necessity for me, because if I don't challenge myself and get out of my small comfort zone, I'm not going to find my sound, right? I'm still looking for the style of music I like. I'm still looking to polish my workflow. Right now, I'm going to start a song with the lyrics. I'm going to start another one with a chord progression. I'm going to start another one with a sound. I'm going to do like a full digital song, a full acoustic song. And every time I challenge myself to experiment a new way to start a song, or I experiment with new sounds, it always leads to amazing experiences where you actually learn a lot, right? And I think this isn't said enough, but how much time do you spend just going through sounds? If you have a little bit of VSTs on your computer, how many kicks do you listen to when you're writing a song? Like for me, it could be 200, right? You can listen to 200 kicks, and you go through your door, and it's like boom, 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 and it's like for 3 hours, and like, it's worth it. Like, spending that time experimenting, going for new sounds, new ways of working, new ways of structuring the songs, new chord progressions. It always comes to, if not a good song, well, at least something you're going to learn, and it's going to make you a better songwriter overall, even if you don't like the song. And as we touched on the first episode, even if you don't like your own songs, someone might.
Exactly.
Screw you, teacher. Yeah, see?
That's the moral of this story. Never respect teachers.
No, I love teachers. But I do want to say one more tip within this tip of experimenting, and this is kind of a backwards tip, because you were talking about VSTs, and so if you're are a writer that has the capability of recording and with virtual instruments. Well, another way to challenge yourself with experimentation is kind of like the blind test, where, in theory, you just kind of close your eyes and you just pick. You'll be like, I'm going to pick 5 instruments, and you just randomly pick 5 instruments. You might have used them before, you might not have used them before, and you're like, I'm going to write a song with just these 5 instruments. And that'll force you to be creative in ways that you didn't know. And that's a very fun and kind of you end up pulling your hair out a little bit, but it's one of those writing exercises that is another very beneficial one to do.
That sounds really fun, actually.
So now here's another tip: loops.
For anyone who doesn't know what a loop is, we're talking about pre-recorded audio tracks that include different elements. Like, it could be a lot of instruments, it could be just a drum beat. The idea is that it's a pre-recorded piece that you just insert into your songs. And some people might consider that it's kind of cheating because you're not producing the sounds yourself, but I think we might have some things to add there.
You're going to get mixed reactions from anybody that talks about loops. Some people will be like, you're cheating. Some people would say like, hey, just come up with your own. And I'll tell you this: using loops in its own self it's an art, because the possibilities are endless, and you still have to piece the puzzle together. So there are different ways you can use loops to benefit you very quickly too. You can use them because there's so many sites now where you can actually use, have permission to use them in your songs, and then B, you can use them for really quick inspiration. Be like, hey, I like this idea, but I think it would be cooler like this. And then you wouldn't have maybe not have thought about that idea if you hadn't heard this loop. And so just pulling that in and just playing along with it, that in itself can, do that domino effect into a song right away. And then you can take that loop out, and then, then it's all yours. Or you can leave it in, or you can chop it up. And, there's just so many cool things you can do with loops. And for me personally, if I was going to use a loop, it would be more for ideas. And then I would go back in and do it. But again, that's what works for me. But what's cool is you can utilize it for however you want to.
And for me, still so early on, just really getting started, figuring out how to do all this stuff, I have very clear weaknesses. I think my biggest weakness probably is percussion, just in general, just all percussion. And so using loops has really been an awesome learning experience for me, because even if I don't use a loop in my song, I'll put it in the DAW and then I'll see what they're doing. I'll just try and listen and pick out things like little tricks that they're using and stuff like that. And then I can incorporate that, and I have slowly been making my percussion sound better, I think. And it's, it really lends itself well, even if that's just another way that you can use loops is just to learn from them, and I think that's really cool, because the people that make these loops are they're experts in the field to some extent. You know what I mean? They might not be the greatest in the world, but they're certainly better than I am. So anything I listen to from them, anything I can get from the loops that are being put out there for free, that's something that I can incorporate, and it's been really helpful.
Sure. Yeah, that's completely true. I don't think I've ever released or produced a song that still had loops in them, but I like using percussions loops. Pre-made, pre-recorded drums and grooves, just so that it puts me in a certain mood or in a certain rhythm where it makes me want to jam to that loop, right? If you're a guitar player or a bassist, you might want to throw in a loop and then play something over it. Just keep recording yourself, and you might come up with some amazing ideas. And then you can take the loop out, like Rahul said. This is usually what I like to do. I also use loops when I want to be in a specific mood. And, usually to create a mood, sometimes you have good loops that have several different instruments, right? So they would take a little bit of time to recreate. So I just throw in the loop just so that my track is in the right mood. I add layers on top of that loop. And then when I feel comfortable that I have preserved that mood and that atmosphere, I remove the loop. And if you try to recreate it from scratch without using it at all, by the time you actually remake it, you might lose your little spark, your inspiration, and you might lose your focus. So I often see loops as a quick way to have a good basis or a good foundation for your song, and it liberates you from a task like writing a drum groove or a drum beat, and it lets you stay in the zone and just keep writing the song.
That's a great, that's a real fast up. That's a great comment you just said, because back to workflow and back to creativity, if you have to slow down to put in a kick drum, a snare for 20 minutes to create your own beat, you just lost your groove. So if you're on a roll, just pull in a loop real fast and then move to the next part, and just keep going like that, and then that way you don't have to slow down. So I didn't even think about that when I was talking about the loops, but that's that. And another thing you said was setting up a vibe. You can just listen to something and it can just put you in the mood to be like, hey, I want to come up with something that makes me feel like this loop does, and then all of a sudden a new song comes out from it. So inspiration again, back to that. It's pretty awesome, man. I might go use some loops tonight.
So speaking of loops, moving on to our next tip, which is tip number 6. Hey, we're moving right along. So Rahul, you also had another idea which involves loops, and basically when you have your own music that you can loop that and then just kind of improvise from there. So can you explain that to us a little bit?
Yeah, this kind of goes back on, with technology and giving us things that we weren't able to do before. Like before, I would have an acoustic guitar and then I have a notebook and a pen, and then I would just have to play, and I would have to come up with the melody and the vocals pretty much right there. Now, a very, very, very helpful trick is if you've got a part that you want to put vocals to, you don't have to come up with those vocals within just that section. What I like to do now is back to loops, I'll have that, say it's a 10-second or 30-second part. I'll have it play the same thing for 2 minutes or a minute or whatever. And I'll record I'll just improv vocals. And 9 out of 10 times, actually all the time when I do it, I just do gibberish. Like if you were to walk in when I'm doing it, you would be like, all right, Rahul just lost his mind. I don't know what he's doing. He's making up English new words, and and what I'll do is I'll do that, and then I'll do it again. So I'll have 4 different tracks of gibberish. But here's what's cool about doing the improv thing is a lot of times you'll find different parts here and there of each performance that you do like. And then the rest of it just be like, oh, crap. So what you can do, you can just piece things together from the improv and be like, and you can actually structure it that way. And then from there, you'll have a melody that's appeasing to your ears, and then you can write lyrics to that. And another thing, though, when you're doing the improv, a lot of times lyrics will just come out, and then it'll give you a basis to write about, and then all of a sudden you'll have a direction of what you want to write about. Because a lot of times you'll come up with something cool and you'll be like, well, what do I write about? I don't know. And the things that come at the spur of the moment, when you're just literally it's on the fly, sometimes it's the greatest stuff. And it's the most natural because that's what's coming straight from your brain without even thinking about it. So it's really cool to do stuff like that. You have fun with it. It's not so planed out. It's not so cut and dry of like, I'm going to write the entire song and just like that. You get to play with it. You get to be like, hey, I like this one section of this one line of the 30 lines I just did. So I'm just going to use that one line, and then I'll go to the next one and pick up another line. And then, you just put them together, and then, it goes back to how important melody is. If you can put together a melody piece by piece, kind of like a puzzle, and then it comes together, then you're set. And then, writing lyrics will come, but the melody, that's a whole other topic of melody versus lyrics. But
For sure.
yeah, it's a very, very good way to write out a melody that you can write lyrics to.
Yeah, speaking of lyrics, that brings to mind something that I think about a lot, which is I find it challenging in writing lyrics to write things that are both meaningful to me and also where the words just sound good, Because I'm like, there's a lot of music that I don't really like. Like, I'm kind of a dick about it, right? And I try my best not to be, and I don't vocalize that dickishness most of the time, except to my wife, and it drives her crazy. But what I'm finding in trying to write my own music is that a lot of the time, the lyrics that people will use in pop songs and stuff like that, they don't use because they mean something necessarily. I mean, they kind of do, but they mostly use because of the way that the vowels sound. You know what I mean? You write lyrics more for sound than for meaning. And trying to do both of those things is really hard. But to your point, if you're going to improvise a melody over your own loop or something like that, it can make it a lot easier because you can get those vowel sounds out, and then you can try and match lyrics up to that instead of writing the lyrics down separately and then realizing that they sound like nonsense when you sing them, like they sound very discordant and weird. So I think it's really helpful for that as well, for getting the lyrics, for getting the melody, for the whole writing process.
Yeah, to comment more about what you just said, our brains, there's so much that goes on with our subconscious. when you're at the supermarket and you hear a song, your brain, and you notice that you're hearing a song, your brain's already heard it. And the reason why you pay attention to it now is because it caught your ear, it caught your brain. So before you even get to that point of finding out what the lyrics are, you're invested in it because you like them, you liked what you heard. And you have to like what you hear before you can even, and again, this all happens in a split second, but your brain will pay attention to the lyrics because it likes what it's hearing as far as the notation goes. And that's a whole other battle about lyrics versus melody. And at the end of the day, you want the lyrics to be awesome too. So having both of those together, like you said, like the vowels and all that kind of stuff, where you enunciate and where you stress things, that usually, for me, that comes first, and then hopefully I will write some cool lyrics to it. Hopefully. Yep. Yeah.
Well, speaking of lyrics, I think this is a good transition to tip number 7, which is using storytelling to have ideas of how to write songs, like to have inspiration. I'm someone who usually introduces his music, like when I present a song I made to my friends, I start by saying, this song is about the story of blah, blah, blah. Like, I always start by telling the story or the idea behind the song before saying, this is a lo-fi beat, this is a jazzy song, this is, like, I always start with the story. I say, this is the story of an old man, blah, blah, blah. And this is usually because I often start writing a song with the idea of a story, and then I try to pick lyrics, instruments, sounds that go well with that story, right? So yeah, my first song was in my head about nostalgia, and I was picturing like an old man like on a rocking chair listening to an old vinyl, right? Like I was picturing this, and I thought like this completely dictated the choice of instruments. I was like, okay, I'm gonna throw in some, maybe a sax, maybe a trumpet, like some kind of like old style, like jazzy vibe, from a few decades ago. I'm gonna add some vinyl distortion sounds. I'm gonna add some piano, but like not just any piano, like maybe an old vintage piano with a little bit of like a distorted sound as well. And like I was not gonna put in any synth or anything that would kind of take me out of that mental picture that I had in mind, right? So the story that I was telling myself is what completely helped me to structure the song, choose a vibe, and choose the instruments, right? I don't know, like, do any of you start with the story sometimes, or is it something that comes up a little bit later in the process of writing a song?
For me, again, this is just my style kind of things. Like I tend to write I tend to write somewhat vaguely. I'll be specific enough, but I try to leave a lot of room for interpretation, because in my opinion, if it's so specific, some people might not relate to it, and it's hard to, because for me, my main motivation for writing for listeners is that they don't feel alone, so that something that they can feel. And so I when I do tell a story, or when I'm telling my story, I'll still leave it up to be like, well, they can still take it for what they want, and who am I to say that's not what it means? So like, even when when other interviews are saying, they'll be like, well, what's the song about? I usually don't say. I just say it's about whatever you think it's about. Is what I say.
One of those.
Yeah, but at the same time, there is a massive benefit for storytelling as well, because if you can pull the listener's interest in the first 4 lines, where they want to know what happens next, you've got them through the whole song. It's kind of like dangling that carrot in front of someone. Like, they will keep going until they know what happens. So like, yes, there's an art to storytelling, absolutely, because once listeners invested in finding out what's happening. They're going to stay there till they find out. So yeah, again, I write my certain way, and I do like to storytell as well sometimes. Just after this video, I probably will try that tomorrow. You know,
Yeah.
but yeah, there is a storytelling, especially with folk music. I mean, man, storytelling is a big aspect of writing music for sure.
And you were even, Paul, in the song you were just talking about, it's an instrumental song, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so you had a story in your head that you're trying to get across just with sound, and that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just for me. It's just for how I was building the song and how I was writing it, and it completely helped me because otherwise I would have had to pick between like 50,000 sounds. That's too confusing. Like
Yeah.
You know, as far like kind of what Paul was talking about, as far as using a story to create the music, that's kind of like a test that I will do with close friends of mine when I'm writing a song. I'll play the music first with no lyrics, because if I can pull an emotion from them just from the song itself, then I know I could do an even better job with the lyrics if I'm putting lyrics to it. If I'm able to tell my story with the music, to me, like, you know, I'm almost there, you know, and then you know, something comes out even more powerful. The pressure's on at that point, because then you don't want to mess it up. But yeah, I mean, if you can use the music to tell a story, that's a very powerful thing as well.
Yeah, and there are actually some songs that I really like that will have lyrics purposefully in contrast to what the music is. You know, so it's a very happy major key sounding song and then really devastating lyrics, and that makes it sadder a lot of the time. You know what I mean? So yeah, storytelling with music and storytelling with lyrics are two different things, and they can be used together or in opposition. And that's storytelling is just great all around. You know, it's an awesome skill to have.
it also helps with the structure. Like I think this is one of my weak points. I always have a hard time structuring my song. Like I can find ideas for a chorus, ideas for maybe a little riff or here and there, but I can always go for the boring A B A B C A B structure, you know. But if you have an idea about what the song is telling, like the story that the song is telling, then it's going to dictate the structure. If you know there's a big drop or a change of mood, then this is going to be reflected in the song. And this is one of the ways that I used to help myself find a structure when I'm struggling to like take some ideas that I like and turn them into a full song.
I want to say one thing that's kind of a little side note to, Paul reminded me of it when he was talking about the rocking chair. And this is a trick to use modestly, but it can have a big effect. Like say if you've got the mood set, and in your head you're picturing a rocking chair, you can go splice and like download a sound of like a rocking chair and put it in the song, and the brain will hear it. You know, you don't have to blast it in the mix. You know, just little tricks like that. Again, like I always say, the subconscious plays a big role in how we hear things. That's another trick that you can use with your songwriting. Again, you don't want to overkill with it, but little things you can put in there. Like if you're talking about like a water stream, and you put real fast, have audio of a water stream, or something that will just help tell the story. So yeah. That's fun. That's fun to do.
Something that I noticed years and years ago that I think is really cool, and I'm sure a billion people in the world have noticed it. But in Bohemian Rhapsody, there's a line in one of the verses. One of the 1,000 verses, right? But he says, "Sent shivers down my spine," and when he says spine, there's a little like chime tinkle in the background. That's the only time in the whole song it appears. And I'm like, oh, that makes me feel it in my spine. Like that's awesome. Yeah, you can get a little literal with it sometimes, and that's really cool.
Yeah, this is the start of ASMR. This is the birth of ASMR. Like,
yeah, there you go.
I mean, I think it's the same. It's the same like physical reaction to these kinds of sounds. Like in stereo, like it produces shivers down your spine. Yeah, that's a cool way. But then we're moving on to music production, and we could talk about so many more things there.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to tip number 8, which I think all three of us agree is a pretty big one, and it can be really, really important. We've been talking a lot about how to generate ideas, how you can sort of implement those ideas a little bit. But something that's really important is to make sure that you actually have those ideas. Like, make sure you keep track of those ideas. That's why you'll find writers will usually carry like a little notepad with them or something. And whenever they come up with an idea for anything, they'll go ahead and jot it down. And with music, you can do the same thing, right? In all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, so what you're saying, like, with people jotting things down, it's I know I've come across where I say lyrics aren't important, but they are. You can have that one really strong lyrical line in a song that can make the song stick out. So if you ever just think it and you just, hey, that sounds cool, I take my phone out and I type it in, and I've got a page I have just one-liners that I thought were cool that I saw in movies or whatever, something like that. And then if it works out, I'll use it in a song, and then kind of a lot of times the idea of the song will come from that line that I heard. So keep track of that. As far as me goes, I mean, now that we have phones that can record, anytime I have an idea, I break it out. I'll tell you one thing though. The one time that or the majority of the time when I'll have random ideas is because I'm hearing something else. Like if I'm watching a movie, a lot of times in the background of a movie, there'll be instrumental stuff. And I'll hear it, and then in my head, again, without me thinking, I'll start hearing a melody that I think would be cool over that part. So I'll bust out my phone and I'll sing that melody, and I'll make sure I know what the speed is, and I'll like that. And then what I'll do is I'll either put it into my session and recording, or I'll just use it and I'll just keep listening to it, and I'll record it again, and then I'll write a song around that melody. And that's something that kind of has happened within the past maybe 2 years that I've started doing that, and it has happened a lot, and I love it because I didn't take the song off the movie. It's not like that, but it inspired me to sing on top of something that didn't have vocals to it. So I just used the vocal part I had, and then I came up with a chord progression behind it, and then the song gets built. Or I'm just sitting there, I'm humming something. I'm like, hey, that's cool. I'm gonna hum it. I'll tell you this right now. If you ever want to blackmail me, steal my phone, go through my audio tracks that I've recorded like this, and then just be like, hey, Rahul, I got you, because there's some embarrassing audio on my phone of me again singing gibberish, spur of the moment melodies.
But I do the same thing. I think on my phone I have 200 or 300 audio files. Some of them are really embarrassing. But actually I do listen to them all the time now. Now, whenever I'm in the mood for writing a song, I just open my phone. If I don't have any idea, I just listen to a lot of audio tracks, and quite often it gets me going. And I think it's really, really useful, and I've committed to record every single idea I have, no matter where I am, and sometimes it's a little embarrassing. I've had to record these in the subway or in public spaces. Like once I was with colleagues. I was lining up in a restaurant just to get a sandwich, and I had this cool bass line in my head, and I took my phone. And I started whispering into my phone. I'm like, and this is there's this 30-second audio file on my phone where you can hear people talking, you can hear the people making food, you can hear the background noises and everything. You can barely hear that bass line, but I ended up going back to that audio file and using it, and it's really worth it. I think those kinds of spontaneous ideas are often some of the best, and you need to just make sure that you're not going to lose them somehow.
Yeah, I think most of the audio files that I have on my phone are recorded with just my face and my phone outside of my shower curtain. Doing it like that, and then putting my phone back outside the shower. Yeah.
With
gotta be ready. Gotta be ready. Get those ideas down, man.
Rubber ducky in hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with the technology, I mean, it's just gotten okay, I'll say this. Back in the day, like, I would have an idea, and within like 3 minutes, I'd somehow be like looking for somebody to record it, and then I'd forget it. And it would drive me insane. And now I can just do it right there, or if I'm at home, I'll just open my recording software, and I'll tell you this, there's a lot of free software out there for you guys. So if you're a songwriter, I really highly suggest just taking a little bit of time, download some free software, learn how to record, just the basics. You don't have to become an expert. Just as long as you can press record your part, press record some vocals, and have them independent of each other, you will be in such a better place to be creative, because you can do it anytime you want, and you can mix it, you can hear it, you can be like, oh, this is what it's going to sound like. Awesome. So I really, really suggest getting something to let you record. And even on your phone, I couldn't believe it, but like you can recording software on your phone now. Put in MIDI notes, you can write music out, and with everything, and you can literally create a song on your phone. So just something to let your creativity not be forgotten by your bad memory, or by my bad memory. So,
yep, same. Yeah, and that, I think, neatly leads into tip number 9, which is one from this guy. And something that I've found really helpful is when you're putting stuff in your DAW, or when you have stuff in your DAW or whatever, or even if you don't yet, I guess, I like to make notes in my DAW. So I know that the free one that I used relatively recently was Cakewalk, and the one that I use now is Studio One, and both of those, and I assume all DAWs really, will have a place where you can make notes on your song. Like you can add, not like music notes, but like text notes. And so I like to use those a lot, especially with when I'm starting to get a little farther in the song, and I'm just kind of listening back to it over and over again. As it's playing, I'll just put a note. Like right here, like you need to bulk up this section of the chorus, or you need to balance these vocals, or whatever, and for me, that's helpful in songwriting because it can, well, one, it just helps me to remember ideas like we were talking about, right? Just get it down somewhere. But also, for me, it helps me as I'm moving farther along in a song to feel like motivated, feel like I'm accomplishing something, because I essentially have a to-do list, and so every time I work on the song, even if I only have a little bit of time, which is kind of something that we talk about in this podcast, right? Because I can't usually sit down and work on a song for 6 hours at a time. My kids are screaming at me the whole time. So every time I go into it, I can just put in a little bit of work and cross something off the list, and that feels really nice. So it's all about it goes right back to keeping track of your progress, keeping track of your ideas, keeping track of what you're doing. And that really helps you to end up with a finished song and to help you end up with a well-written song.
Just because I got used to it, I'll make notes on my phone.
Oh,
about
yeah,
certain
sure,
things.
sure.
Yeah. But I mean, it's the same thing. It's basically the same thing.
Yep.
I usually do that. Like, I mean, again, this goes more into the production side, but when I'm finalizing a song, I usually download it on my phone and I listen to it when I go to work or whenever, and I take notes on my phone. But it's like, if I had access to my DAW, I would do it on my DAW. But I usually do that like in public transportation whenever I have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, so we're starting to mention a lot of different things here, and I think it all comes down to figuring out what the best workflow is for you, right? What we mean by workflow, we started talking about it earlier, but it is how you write songs, like your own way of working and producing music, right? So what's your opinion about that, Rahul?
Well, workflow is probably one of the most used terms in like message boards, recording message boards and like in conversation, because of how important it is and how ongoing it's always changing. When you buy something new, it'll change. So basically, like a workflow is what you typically do to get to where you want to be. It's the tools that work for you. And but it's typically there are things that you can do to speed things up. Okay, for instance, like one of the for people that are just now learning, learning your keyboard shortcuts, that speeds up your workflow. It'll become at first, because you don't want to be recording and then have to look up Google how to do something, real fast, because it'll take you out of your writing zone. So if you just learn these things, and again, it takes time, but it'll become like riding a bike, and that'll become part of your workflow. And again, this pertains to recording, but another one is having templates. If typically say, like for me, I like to record my vocals on the verse separately than I do the chorus. And I know in the chorus, I'm going to layer my vocals. So if I have to sit there and sing a track, create a new track, then sing a track, create a new track, and then all this kind of stuff, all that kind of stuff adds up. And when you've got to do these little things over and over again for like 5 hours, that little time adds up. And again, it's not even about the time, it's about getting you out of your workflow. Getting out of your workflow means you kind of got to get back in the zone. And whatever helps you stay in the zone is basically your workflow. That's what you're trying to improve. And it's just super, super important. And again, if you're not recording on, with a computer or anything like that, your workflow could be like, hey, I write better when I leave my bedroom and I go to the park. That could be part of your workflow. I like to write the lyrics first. That could be part of your workflow. I mean, you could just whatever you can bring to the table that'll make your life easier, so that you can concentrate on being creative. And that's basically how this stuff that's really important. Find what works for you again. I mean, again, it's all based on the individual. But there are little things you can do that if you notice speeds it up for you. There's ways you can utilize that,
Yeah, this is always something that I'm really jealous of in watching other producers make music, on YouTube or whatever, and especially in Andrew Huang's class, where we mentioned in the first podcast episode that we all met. When he was walking through making a song, everything he did was so fast. He was like, oh, I think this needs a little fill here. Let me find a sample. I'm going to put it in there. Okay, let me chop it up. Let me use it this way, And I'm like, that would take me a day to do, But because he knows how to do it so quickly, because his workflow is so clean and he's been doing it for so long, he can try out 45 different ideas in the time it takes me to try 3, And it's so helpful for writing because you get every idea that you could have, you can get it out there instead of being completely interrupted, losing half your ideas, not figuring out how to do some, So workflow for writing is so helpful and something that I aspire to develop any semblance of, because I know it will be very helpful for me when I can.
It's important to remember not to get discouraged either, because it's not like these people all of a sudden were able to do 45 tracks in they started where you started. Everybody starts at the same spot, it just comes. So it's, definitely do not get discouraged with learning, because we all do it, and use the people that know what they're doing as inspiration to be like, hey, I can do that, because all they did was spend the time and they learned how to do it. And that'll happen for you. Again, it becomes like riding a bike. These little things that you won't even know. Your hands will go there. The shortcuts will it'll just happen, and you'll find yourself not having to Google so many things. And then once you'll get into a place where you can concentrate on the creativity.
Totally. I think repetitive tasks and technical difficulties are like two of the biggest creativity killers, right? And this goes even before actually recording something or producing the song. If you're just still in the process of writing the song or coming up with ideas, if your guitar stand is at the end of your bed, you're going to play every day. If your guitar is in the basement in a hard case under a piano, you're never going to play, and your creativity is going to die, and because you're never going to be able to stop being lazy and actually go get that guitar. Because sometimes you're gonna feel like, oh, I kind of want to noodle a little bit, maybe write a song. oh, the guitar is downstairs. And it sounds silly because you literally already have the instrument. It's in your house, but you're not going to do it just because it's 30 seconds away. And like, I can't tell you, like, I'm ashamed to tell you how many times I have not played the guitar because it was not in the right room.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Definitely been guilty of that myself. There have been months and months where my guitar's been in my closet and I haven't pulled it out or anything. But yeah, the last couple of places I've lived, I've tried really hard to keep it nearby, and I've played it a lot more.
Yeah, I've got no excuse because my bed is right there. So I literally can roll out of bed and get in the studio and record. I mean, in fact, now with like Bluetooth stuff, my big screen TV that I watch movies on, I can put my DAW on there, so I can just record from bed. You know?
Oh man, how do you sleep with all those fancy blinking lights?
I have zero excuse.
That's how he makes 4 tracks a day.
Yeah, right? For real.
All right, so there's one last tip I wanted to share with you guys, and it's actually probably the one that has helped me the most. It's making playlists. And like I'm going to develop this a little bit, but for me, making playlists is one of the best ways to have ideas for new songs, for melodies, for progressions, for structures, for everything. What I like to do is, well, I listen to a lot of music, of course, whenever I'm doing something else, when I'm driving, when I'm going to work, etc. Whenever there's a song that puts me in a creative mood, I add it to my like inspiration for songs playlist. And I have a full playlist that has dozens of songs that put me in this songwriting mood. And whenever I'm home and I'm thinking, well, I have 3 hours, I can spend time songwriting, but I'm not feeling like it. I don't have any idea. I'm not really in the mood. I just play that playlist. It has a lot of different genres in it, but I just play the songs in a random order until there's one song that puts me in the right mood. And when I find that song, I just put it on repeat. I open my DAW and then I start putting down some ideas.
That's a really cool idea, and one that I have not used before, but I really should, because I have been finding myself even more of late, even when I'm watching a TV show or something and it has a really cool song in it. It's something that I would like to go back to, but I don't usually like take the time to put it down somewhere and have it easily accessible. But I really should. Yeah, I imagine that would help. That would help a lot.
It's also a way of doing something productive when you don't really have the time and when you're not actually in front of your computer, just going through songs and finding the ones that will help you be more productive once you're home and once you have time. I think this is really satisfying to tell yourself that, okay, you're wasting time on a bus, but you're doing something productive for later.
No, absolutely. Playlists are very important. It's something that I recently started doing as well, a little bit differently. Like, so, I'm a songwriter for my stuff, but at the same time now, I'm getting into writing for other artists and producing. So what I'll do is I'll sit there and I'll take an hour and I'll go through the top 50 songs that's in the on Billboard right now in the top 40, and I'll find one that I'm like, okay, all right. And typically, again, a lot of these songs aren't really, they're pretty simple. So if there's a song that I'm like, hey, this gets me going, and just got the kick on the 1, 2, one on the ones or whatever, just whatever, I'll kind of take that and I'll be like, hey, this is the vibe I want, and I'll use that song and I'll even bring it into the DAW, and I'll kind of use it as a kind of like if I get stuck, I'm gonna go back and, hey, this is what I like about it. They did this kind of thing here, and I'll use it for inspiration to write. But yeah, I mean, when you're listening to other stuff that you feel something from, you're not ripping them off when you're trying to do it. I mean, I'm I'm not going there and I'm like playing the guitar parts, but we all take things from inspiration, from what people have done before us, and we make it into our own. And that's what's the gift. It's like the gift that keeps on giving with music. And so there's a song that moves me, I'm gonna make it my own, and hopefully aim to have that same effect on someone else, and that's when an actual song can be an inspiration for a brand new song. Yeah. Again, I'm not telling you to rip off the song, but yeah, you can again like make notes of what you like about the song, and then use that to guide you a little bit.
Yeah, this is research and development.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really about, even if it's not like a playlist of songs, although it probably should be, among other things, but it's about giving yourself easy access to inspirational things.
Exactly.
Which is something that I would really like to do. I mean, obviously in this space, like I haven't lived in this house for very long. Like I just set this up not very long ago at all. So I need to like do this, but I want to put art on the walls that makes me feel inspired and decorations and stuff like that. I need to start putting songs together. Yeah, you've already got some, Paul. That's really cool, actually. But yeah, you wanna give yourself easy access to inspiration, and that's gonna help you to feel more inspired, more creative, more of the time.
All right, so that's the last one of our 11 tips that we shared today with you. Do you have anything to add, Rahul, before we close this episode?
Yeah, I want to say one more thing that I almost forgot about. Again, knowledge is power. So keep learning. And one thing that with YouTube, there's tutorials for everything. Some good, some bad. But you can learn anything you want to learn. You can learn it on YouTube. And if there's a producer, say there's a song you like. Odds are you can find a session of that producer, and you can kind of see a lot of producers will have sessions that they have online, and you can kind of see their process. Again, it's all about learning from as much as you can so you can put it in your tool belt. So yeah, there are different avenues. There's subscription-based places where you can learn. There's YouTube. There's monthly classes that you can be a part of. That's I think is beneficial for anybody of any skill set. But always try to keep learning. It doesn't matter, no matter if you're a pro or whether you're just starting tomorrow. Keep learning because it's never ending, and knowledge is the gift that keeps on giving for real. It really is.
And my favorite place to learn how to do things, especially like about music, is to watch YouTube podcasts or videocasts of handsome gentlemen talking about what it is that I'd like to learn. So, if you want to see that, you're in the right place.
Yeah, YouTube or Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts or anywhere you want. We are now everywhere. So that's it for this episode. I hope you learned something. I did learn a lot from you, Rahul, so I really wanted to thank you for joining us. This was really a pleasure.
I had a blast. Thank you very much for having me. I'll always try to pay it forward, and you guys are on your way, so you guys do the same, and you are paying it forward. You're helping people learn. So kudos to you guys, and thank you for doing this show for people.
Thank you so much. The main purpose of the podcast is to help as many people as we can to unleash their creativity, and hopefully we can help some people become songwriters or better songwriters if they're already started. I definitely think you helped doing that today, so thank you once again. And yeah, as always, if you have any question, feel free to reach out to us either on YouTube or by email at jmspodcast@inspiredsongwriter.com. This has been a pleasure, and see you in episode 3.
Bye.